The Senate is in session.
Messages from Her Excellency the President.
I have received the following message from the President, which I will read. It's dated 27th of May, 2022. And I read this. Dear Mr. President, I wish to inform the Honorable Senate that, with the approval of the Honorable Prime Minister, I shall be on vacation leave from the 27th of May to the 18th of June, 2022. In accordance with the provisions of Section 33 of the Constitution, the Very Reverend Dr. Jeffrey Douglas Gibson will perform the functions of the office of the President during my absence. As the Honorable Senate will not be meeting prior to the start of my vacation leave, it is not possible for the usual formal message to be sent to your chamber. Will you therefore please bring my absence formally to the attention of the Honorable Senate when next it meets? Yours faithfully, and signed by the President.
Presentation of petitions, presentation of papers.
Thank you very much. I have received the minutes of our meeting held on the 4th of May, 2022 for confirmation. Senator Cummins.
Mr. President, I beg to move that the minutes be adopted at this time.
Honourable Senators in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. The things the ayes have it. Minutes are so confirmed.
Presentation of petitions, presentation of papers.
Senator Cummins.
Mr. President, I am commanded to lay the following documents: the Fair Trading Commission Annual Report 2020 and the annual reports and audited financial statements of the National Petroleum Company, NPC, for the following years: March 31st, 2015, March 31st, 2016, 2017, 2018, as well as March 31st, 2019.
Reports from select committees, questions to ministers, request for leave to move the adjournment of the Senate on matters of urgent public importance, statements by ministers or parliamentary secretaries, personal explanations, motions relating to the business or sitting of the Senate and moved by a minister.
Senator Cummins.
Mr. President, I beg to move the suspension of Standing Order 45-2 for the remainder of today's sitting.
The question is that Standing Order 45-2 be suspended for the remainder of today's sitting. Honourable Senators in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. The things the ayes have it.
Introduction of bills.
Senator Cummings.
Mr. President, I beg to move the reading of the following resolution to approve in accordance.
Bills.
Mr. President, I beg to move the first reading of the following bills: the first reading of the Caves Amendment Bill 2022, and the first reading of the Airport Service Charge Bill, also 2022, and finally the reading of the Animals, Diseases and Importation Amendment Bill 2022.
The question is that those bills so mentioned be read the first time. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. The things the ayes have it.
Mr. President, we go to, at this time, to private members' business.
Private members' business, and stand on behalf of private members' resolution. Senator Bradford.
Mr. President, I would like to give notice of a resolution on food security, which has been prepared in the context of current global affairs and their implication for Barbados.
So you said, Mr. President, they could give notice of the following resolution and read it.
Whereas the global spread of the coronavirus pandemic, COVID-19, and the war between Russia and Ukraine have both created an unstable global economic situation in this 22nd year of the 21st century. And whereas these events have exposed the vulnerability of small island developing states like Barbados to the lack of indigenous energy and food supplies, which threatens the viability of our model of development. And whereas the pandemic, the war between Russia and Ukraine, and diverse adverse weather effects in the last 2 years have resulted in a significant reduction in global food supplies. And whereas 1/3 of the world's wheat, 2/3 of the world's sunflower oil production, and a significant part of the world's fertilizers are supplied by Russia and Ukraine. And whereas there's a general view that the health crisis has already evolved into an economic crisis, and the combination of the pandemic and the war against signal the real possibility of a food crisis. And whereas the World Food Programme and the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations have already predicted that in the near future, the occurrence of famines of biblical proportions. And whereas historically many Caribbean countries, including Barbados, grew by narrowly focusing on tourism and have neglected the agricultural sector, which has resulted in a massive dependency on imports of food and a food import bill of some $4 billion in CARICOM. And whereas, Mr. President, the governments of 35 countries around the world have adopted export controls to secure their domestic food supplies in the last 2 years, and some have banned the export of wheat, soya, corn, and fertilizers. And whereas the Caribbean food supply is heavily reliant on imports from the United States, where data from the International Trade Center indicates that 15 nations of the Caribbean community source up to 94% of their food imports from the U.S. market. 94% of all CARICOM import of cereals, 90% of edible fruits and nuts, 90% of edible vegetables and certain roots and tubers, and 91% of sugars and sugar confectionery imports originate from that source. And whereas the consumption of imported processed foods high in trans fats, saturated fats, sugar and salt have been associated with a high incidence of chronic non-communicable diseases in our region. And whereas in 2011, a high-level meeting was held at the United Nations in New York to discuss the need for a global attack on the incidence of chronic non-communicable diseases, that meeting concluded that cardiovascular disease, cancer, chronic lung disease, and diabetes are responsible for some 60% of all deaths in the world. And one of the risk factors contributing to the incidence of these diseases is the increased consumption of processed foods and ready-to-serve meals that are rich in trans fats, saturated fats, salts, and sugars. And whereas the meeting indicated that chronic non-communicable diseases are a threat to development, as these diseases contribute to high healthcare costs and low productivity, be it resolved, therefore, that in the light of the global food crisis, that Barbados develop an integrated food security plan, which will reposition the agricultural sector, recognize farmers as important contributors to economic development, and decree that all vacant arable land be used to produce food, strengthen the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Nutritional Security, allocate more resources to the sector, especially for investment in new technologies and market information systems, focus our research and development efforts on agricultural technologies for production and processing of locally produced foods, promote a change in the consumption patterns of the population from a focus on imported food to a focus on the consumption of local foods by promoting nutrition education and implementing appropriate policy measures, review our policies on the importation of food items and promote incentives to produce food locally and regionally, review our land use policies, strengthen agricultural extension services, make agriculture and food security a compulsory subject on the curriculum of our schools, strengthen the fisheries subsector, and promote climate-smart agriculture by the incorporation of climate-smart technologies in production, promote private sector, public sector partnerships in food production and food processing, and the development of an agricultural insurance system to support this initiative. Develop a regional agricultural information system that would inform on the availability of food supplies in various countries of the region during the year, thereby strengthening initiatives to promote regional trade and creating the enabling environment to move food from countries and areas with excess to countries and areas with deficits, and develop a system of payments for regional food trade in local currencies. And be it further resolved that the integrated food security plan be informed by the agricultural development vision, which was developed in 2012, which seeks to develop a food security focus for agriculture in Barbados. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Dr. Graffitt. The matter will be, the resolution will be circulated and a date set for its debate.
Public business.
Public business is now the order of the day.
Order number 2, sir. In the name of the Honorable Leader of the Senate, to move the second reading of the Caves Amendment Bill 2022.
Senator Collins.
Mr. President, thank you for the introduction to this bill. The Caves Act, which is before us, covers, in this instance, Mr. President, the change which is being made to allow for the accountability of the cave to fall as done in legislation several years ago under the office of the Minister of Tourism. As you would recall, many years ago, there were changes made to the legislation which at the time fell under the Ministry of Environment, and there were technical committees which were established which constitute the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Tourism, the Ministry with responsibility for energy, as well as the various planning agencies, including the Barbados National Town Planning Authority, and now, of course, the planning and development legislation structures which are in place for any kind of construction in these areas. What we do have now, Mr. President, is a change to the legislation which allows the assignment of the caves legislation to any ministry as so determined by the cabinet at that time, by the Prime Minister at that time, without actually having to change it in the legislation. And so simply put, without having, in the same way that we shifted maritime affairs, for example, from what would have been MABE, and it now falls under the Ministry with responsibility for environment. In this instance, without having to have a legislative requirement, which then gave effect to that mandate, equally so the Caves Act will treat to that. But that is a simple part of the Caves Act. I want to use my time this morning, Mr. President, to speak to Barbados and to share with the Senate the broader agenda as a result of the conversations that have evolved from the debate in the other place as it relates specifically in the first instance to Harsons Cave, the surrounding community and their relationship with Harsons Cave, and then ultimately the broader remit of the Caves Act itself. Now, Mr. President, it is no secret that in 2018, then into 2019, the government of Barbados undertook to have a management agreement negotiated with a range of potential partners by inviting requests for proposals from partners locally and regionally, as well as internationally, in fact, to manage and operate the cave. The ownership of the cave remains that of the state. It remains owned by the government of Barbados, but it is under management contract by a third party. Mr. President, at the time, as you heard from the other place, there were a number of submissions, and of those submissions, one particular submission stood out and was successful. Chukka Caribbean, which has now been established in Barbados as Chukka Barbados, has since been established, and we now have Chukka being the entity that is taking responsibility for the management of Harsons Cave. Now, I want to be very clear in my presentation today. The Caves Act, nowhere in the Caves Act does it expressly mention Harsons Cave. And so I do not want there to be at any time an equivalence being created between the Caves Act and Caves Amendment Act and Harsons Cave on its own. Any cave in Barbados, any cave structure in Barbados is covered under this legislation called the Caves Act, including its amendment. Harsons Cave happens to be one of those caves, but this legislation covers all caves. That will be the second part of my presentation after I have spoken a little bit about what is happening with Harsons Cave specifically. Now, why Harsons Cave, Mr. President? Harsons Cave has been the marquee attraction for tourism in Barbados for as long as we know. It evolved ultimately, Mr. President, first the management and the team from the National Conservation Commission, they were morphed into the Harsons Cave. That entity became the management team for the structure. But now we have a management company that is not treating to the cave purely for the purposes of taking trams through the cave and its various halls, or keeping the environs around the caves clean. They have actually brought a level of innovation and investment to Harson's Cave that has been welcomed by the tourism sector. Mr. President, when we first looked at this project, Chukka Barbados indicated that they would spend approximately $6 million in investment in this project. The project was supposed to be completed by the end of last year. We could not have anticipated that COVID would have been what it was, and the consequence obviously was that it delayed construction as a result of the series of lockdowns and restricted movement directives that we have been functioning under. That notwithstanding, Mr. President, we are now at the stage where we have now moved from an investment of anticipated $6 million at the time of the management contract being awarded to $10 million being projected as to where we are now as a result of an expanded investment program. Mr. President, I had the privilege, along with a number of partners, to view the current phase of the cave just a few weeks ago, and I am looking forward on the 15th of June, God spare life, to joining the Chukka team again there at Harson's Cave to officially open the completion of phase 1. Now, what has been completed at the end of phase 1, you remember I did say that initially we started out having a beautiful structure, naturally engineered. We put man-made structures in it to allow for us to be able to navigate going through the various halls of the cave. And the trams have been fantastic and the gully grounds were being maintained. But what do we have now, Mr. President? Mr. President, the investment of $10 million is earmarked over a period of 3 phases. Those 3 phases, one of them have already been completed. And what do we have? When you enter the cave now, Mr. President, and I'm looking forward to Barbadians in particular, getting out there and enjoying the cave and seeing what we have with a natural asset. But I'll come back to that in a little bit. When you enter the cave now, the entire area has been opened up. On the right-hand side of the entrance area of the cave, Mr. President, you now have a new retail area. And what I'm most proud about in that retail area is not the offering for sale of T-shirts or, little tokens and souvenirs. It is the inclusion for sale of locally produced books and coloring books by children from in the community as part of the Chukka Foundation, and the partnership with schools like Holy Innocents School in St. Thomas, which is just around the corner from the Harson's Cave. That is one of the things that I am most proud of, seeing how Chukka Caribbean has evolved into corporate social responsibility and has been actively developing kiosks with the neighboring community and ensuring that there are employment opportunities for persons in the community, but that our school children also are able to bring their creativity and their excitement into the retail operations of the cave by producing on their behalf under the foundation, which is led incidentally by the Honourable Member of Parliament for St. Thomas, and bringing those into the retail opportunities, and then those funds going back into Holy Innocents Primary School. We're very proud to have been able to see that evolve, and we're looking forward to even more unfolding over time. If you move a little further into the cave, Mr. President, then you get to where Bajans, the place where rum was first developed. I'm sure that you don't enjoy rum, Mr. President, but I will speak to those that probably do. But there's a rum museum that has been established. So you have children on the one hand, but you also have an experience for families. And so families come, especially in the summer months for tourism. People come with their families and they're looking for different types of experiences for those families, children, adults, and friends all included. So for those people who are so inclined, you can enjoy a rum tasting, Mount Gay Silver, Mount Gay XO. You have the Black Barrel rum as well. You have the tasting, but you also have a rum bar. Then you're making your way through the cave through an interpretation center. They have created an experience where beautiful imagery has been created, drone footage, virtual visual images of Barbados, which tell a short 7-minute story about Barbados in the first instance as a destination. So just in case you have only seen the cave, we want you to be able to see all that Barbados has to offer. So the cave shows you the cave as well as Destination Barbados in a short 7-minute video. Then you go into the cave. And Mr. President, before you even enter the cave, what Barbadians will see when they get to Harson's Cave is what is possible with creativity and innovation. And I must tell you, Mr. President, that one of the partners who was on the ground with us that day he said to me, I said, what do you think about what you're seeing? What do you think about the development so far? And he said to me, I'm ashamed. I said, why are you ashamed? He said, I'm ashamed because I didn't think of doing this. I'm ashamed because I wish I had done this. On the floor of the cave, Mr. President, well, probably before you even got to the floor of the cave, there's the first zip line. 110 feet above the floor of the gully is a zip line. And so we can zip from one side of the gully over onto the other side. And the beauty of it in the serene environment of St. Thomas and in the Welshmore Hall Gully area, it's completely quiet, no loud sound. They're almost invisible unless the people on the zip line make noises themselves. And it is designed to fit into the environment and to be respectful of what has now been rebranded as an ecotourism park here in Barbados. Not just Harson's Cave, but a full ecotourism park in this country. Mr. President, on the floor of the gully, you now have a range of things that you can do. You have, to the left of the gully entrance, Mr. President, an adventure, an obstacle course. I can't wait to go on that obstacle course, Mr. President. It's suspended above the ground. You cannot fall. If you're like me and you're not necessarily that fit, you're probably going to take the easier part of the challenge course. If you're like you, Mr. President, and you're super fit and ready to go, you're probably going to take the more challenging part of the course. But it goes from, it doesn't even have an age limit. It takes, if you are anywhere under 260 pounds, you can do the challenge course at Harson's Cave. So there's no discrimination of any kind on the challenge course. And so you're able to have that. But then you have the cave. The cave has been preserved. It remains untouched and uninterfered with. So the original icon that we are so proud of remains in full preservation mode. In addition to that, Mr. President, we now have opened back up through Chukka Barbados the nature trail. There were people, when we took the media through the nature trail, they were stunned that this was all there. They're like, this was always here. They have created bars. There is a 4,200 square foot bird aviary, which has been created. It is invisible in the environment, and it allows for children to enter the interpretation center as well through the double doors to be able to interact with the birds, especially the smaller birds that children enjoy, like budgies and so on, as well as a monkey park where people, visitors, may not be Barbadians, but visitors enjoy going to watch monkeys. I'm not quite sure because I'm Bajan. I see them every day, so I'm not going to a park to see them, but something about visitors really enjoy seeing monkeys in a park. But then, Mr. President, you also have in phase 2 and phase 3 coming in, a suspension bridge, which is going to be around 80 feet above the ground, and local partners are working through that. And then we also have, Mr. President, an infinity pool, which is going to be at the farthest end of the gully. The Green Monkey Bar and Cafe has been renovated. Barbadian and Caribbean music, Barbadian and Caribbean food, and it's this ambiance all the time. So while your family may be going through the cave, while your kids or your excitable ones are on the challenge course, while somebody's on the zip line, while the parents are having a rum tasting tour, you could either in a private cabana at the edge of the gully, sit uninterrupted in the absolute privacy of your cabana and be served by people coming to bring you food and drinks and not have to move, and you're overlooking the gully cliff, the gully face, and it is beautifully landscaped. The temperature is perfect. The infinity pool is going to go in phase 2. It will not be that bright blue, fancy colored pool that we see in hotel properties, for example, but you will have it that fits into the aesthetic. So you will have the black tiling or the dark gray tiling that makes it look as though it belongs in that environment, and it's going to have curves and edges to give full respect to the environment that it is in. So you could sit by the pool, sit in a gazebo, sit in a cabana, sit at the bar, sit at a table at a restaurant. You could do any number of things, and we have taken, again, through investment, innovation, and creativity, a single attraction and converted it into 5. Just like that, $10 million, and we have been able to create an entire eco-park experience out of what was once known and seen only as Harson's Cave. And that is the reason why, Mr. President, I tell you all the time that I make no apologies for the fact that I am a staunch regionalist, and I believe in collaboration. And if the colleague that said to me, When I asked how the cave, how they felt about what they were saying, it's a shame. I didn't think of this myself. We have to allow new ideas to come to the table so that we're able to benefit from transformations like the one that is unfolding right now in Harson's Cave and the surrounding area. But that brings me to the second part of my presentation, Mr. President, and I did say that this legislation does not in any way speak specifically to Harson's Cave. It speaks to caves. And so the dense network of caves that exist all across the country, Coles Cave, and the Honorable Senator, there's a senator in here, Senator Nichols, who is very familiar with this area, can speak to the dense network of caves all across the area, St. Thomas and St. Joseph and other parts of the central part of the country, St. George, and so on. These are caves which are nascent. And we have now given the mandate to the Caves of Barbados Limited, the board. As you know, Harson's Cave previously was their primary mandate, and they were responsible for managing Harson's Cave. The board no longer has a responsibility for managing Harson's Cave. They manage the relationship with Chukka, which manages Harson's Cave. So now the board has been tasked and given a responsibility to look at the broad opportunities that now can be presented by people who are seeing what can be done, who are seeing what is possible because they may not have imagined it before, and then potentially creating new greenfield opportunities for investment in Barbados and the expansion of new projects in the country that will attract investment and opportunities, especially at the level of communities. And so the Caves of Barbados Limited Board has now been tasked with the responsibility of inviting proposals for persons to come in and provide consultancy services on how Barbados can leverage this vast network of caves, and in the reverse, the gullies that are adjoining it, because I did speak in great detail about how the gully at Harson's Cave and the adjoining spaces have been used to create experiences and to take advantage of the rich ecotourism heritage or eco-heritage that Barbados has available to it. And so we're very proud of what work has already been done. We are excited about the potential that the work now shows us can be done elsewhere. And we are committed, of course, to the communities that anchor these things in the way that I have just outlined, specifically including things like the Holy Innocents Primary School. Now, I also want to give a bit of an update on some of the specific concerns that have been raised by persons who live in the area. Now, several years ago, I believe somewhere back in 2016, the initial work that was supposed to be done on its geotechnical study on the area was to have been commenced. In 2018, that work was recommissioned and the work was meant to begin in 2019. When 2020, so we completed the work, we contracted the firm, there's a local firm, and that firm then has a subcontracted partner, because as you would appreciate, the work, especially on the crown of the cave, is highly specialized, and they're not every type, it's not every type of profession that can deal with the kind of geotechnical work that needed to be done. The subcontracting firm is a Canadian firm, and once COVID struck, that company was unable to travel to Barbados to complete the work that was required to begin phase one. As everybody knows, especially if you've been following the news and you've been following what has happened in the world, for almost a year, February 2021, the government of Canada suspended southbound flights. Nothing came into sun destinations in the Caribbean or Mexico. And so for the duration of that period of time, all the way from 2020 into 2021, we did not have that work being undertaken. That work is now underway now, and the expectation is that there will be work completed. All 3 phases will be completed by the next 3 months, and we will be in a position once and for all to give a definitive report on the status of the fissures that were first detected several years ago at the crown of the cave. That work we will complete once the technicians have done their work. We have already met with the Member of Parliament for the area, brought her into meetings with the caves team, and given her a briefing as to what the technicians are working through. So she is then in a position to share with the communities that are of concern, what the issues are, what the timelines look like, and what they can expect. We did have last year a series of town hall meetings, and we did walk door to door at all of the communities that were affected, and we spoke to people directly. And I say all of this to say that it became quite unfortunate that persons who were on the outside of those processes began to speak in ways about issues that they were clearly not necessarily fully up to date about, and then in some ways create an unfortunate narrative that there had been no communication. That is categorically not the case. What we do have and what we do expect to see, certainly from the representative for the area, is that once that report has been done, we have given a commitment at the government level that we will request not only the technical report, but we will request a layman's report so that people are able to read what these things really mean. Because if I look at the technical study and the geotechnical survey, I don't know what that means in layman's terms, and I most certainly don't know what it means for me as someone who lives in the area. We have committed to translating that into ways that allow people to understand what it means, and also to facilitate town hall meetings with the residents of the area who are affected so that they have the opportunity one-on-one to ask whatever questions they feel are important to them. And we give that commitment again. We're a government that consults. We're a government that engages. We're a government that shares information, and we're a government that answers questions. And this instance with the residents in particular in Allenview will be no different. We will make sure that people and their lives are comfortable and they feel as though the government is in fact listening to them and providing solutions to the problems that they have raised with us. And so that is where we will go over the coming months. We expect that by September, October, at the very latest, we will be in a position to give a further update. So, Mr. President, that is the Caves Amendment Act. We expect that, again, we will be in a position to also give an update on the findings of our consultant once recruited on the opportunities for investment. But it also makes us, Mr. President, very clear on the fact that there is a need for an expansion of our product in this country. There is a need for us to be able to have more to do in this country. But there also is a need, Mr. President, for us to spend time twinning that which was old with that which is new and bringing those ideas together to be able to create and to effect complete transformation. If we were to keep Harson's Cave, for example, Mr. President, in a state that it was in when I grew up, how many ever years ago, or when I last saw it 5 years ago or 10 years ago, then, Mr. President, we would no longer be catering to the needs of today's environment. All through Harson's Cave, for example, and I'll close here, Mr. President. Throughout Harson's Cave, in particular in the area of the Nature Walk, there are a series of swings, and we will be collaborating with Chaka to put up a specific installation. Those swings are what they call Instagrammable moments. Those swings, it was amazing to watch. Every single person, I clearly am not terribly concerned with some things, but every single person, including our colleagues who were on the ground with us, sitting in that swing. Come and take a picture of me. Come and take a picture of me. And it was funny to see how many of those photos then presented themselves on social media. That's what in marketing, I am told by the marketing experts, is called user-generated content. That is what you can't pay for. Once upon a time, Mr. President, people used to issue press releases. Once upon a time, you used to have magazines, and you open magazines, and that was an ad, and that was what you used. Then social media was introduced, and social media came along and has changed the way in which people generate and you use and consume content. We may not understand it because it's not our generation, but that doesn't mean that that's not what is selling. And so user-generated content, Mr. President, is what has been used and what cannot be paid for. If 10,000 people pass through Harson's Cave and 8,000 people of those people pause and sit on one of those swings, take a single photo with Chaka, Barbados, Harson's Cave Eco Park above them, and they post that on their social media page. If they have 5,000 visitors, 10,000 followers, 1 million followers, and you take social media influencers, for example, through the cave, when they sit in those Instagrammable moments and they post that, the kind of currency that trades in, the reach that it gets, you can't put marketing spend behind it. And so when you see us around the country putting up postcards, framing out iconic images, for example, at Bathsheba, Whole Town, at places on the South Coast. That's what you're talking about. If you don't want to go, that's okay, but there are many people who are going, many people who are taking those photos, and many people who are posting those photos, and those photos bring value to a destination because people and their followers then are marketing you and you don't pay a cent for it. That's the way of social and digital media in 2022. And Barbados has made a concrete decision that we are getting on board. And so Chukka Caribbean is doing the same thing internal to the Harsons Cave area, and we expect that they, along with the local communities, along with their long-stay visitors and concierge desks in hotels, along with the cruise ships with whom they have strong relationships, will have a strong performance evolving by winter 2022, and that by 2023, when the cave is completely finished, that we will see a model evolving that is going to be worthy of replication, not just locally, but across the region. And with these few words, Mr. President, I'm obliged.
Thank you very much, Senator Cummings. Speakers? No?
Mr. President, I beg to move the second reading of the Caves Amendment Bill.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I want to thank the Leader of Government Business in the Senate for that excellent exposition. Increasingly, Mr. President, sir, I have to tell you that it makes me recognize how long I have been around. I'm not going to say how long I have been around, sir, how long you and I have been around. I just want to make a few observations and comments. And sometimes I realize that we are very much an oral tradition, that what has happened goes out of the memory with time and people don't write it down. We don't have a written history of the political stories, of the policy experiences, of why we went from A to B, what triggered so-and-so, what were the drivers of particular policy decisions. And therefore, I want to take the opportunity this morning just to fill a bit of a historical gap in relation to this matter of the cave, and then to come back to where we are today. It was my honor as the Minister of Environment for some time to lead the redevelopment of the Harrison Cave from the old and original development into this more modern structure, utilizing the lifts that brought the outside in, the glass lifts, using the recycling of water and having a green and environmentally friendly facility. It was an expensive redevelopment, made all the more so because one resident whose land was required for part of the facility absolutely refused to move, and while they refused to move, the costs were mounting because you had to have construction crews mobilized, you had to keep paying, delays ensued, costs rose, and it became quite an expensive project. But the redevelopment itself was an expensive one, particularly because of the decisions that were taken at the policy level for the kinds of lifts that we use, to have the kinds of aesthetics that we use, to ensure that we were having a green facility, so that Harrison Cave, essentially a lot of people don't know, was designed as Barbados's first green facility, with the recycling of water, the use of green energy, and so on. And it therefore remains a project of which I am very proud. Having said that, historical reality, let me also make the point that, again, what we do to maintain facilities, to create facilities, to have tourism product isn't necessarily known to the public. One of the first things that I did when I became environment minister was actually to go to the other place, or the Lord Chamber, and to bring legislation, I think it was, which cleared a buffer zone around the cave to protect it, because as you will appreciate, you're talking about coral stone and porous rock, porous material, geological material. And what we found is that all of the pig farming and agricultural activities, the chemicals used in the farming around the cave, were actually filtering into the cave and starting to stain the stalactites and stalagmites, and therefore and creating bad odors in the cave as well, because once there were certain types of leaching and secretions into the cave, then it also became very malodorous. So to the very first step to protect the cave as a natural asset, to protect the cave ecosystem, and to protect it as a revenue-generating tourism product, was to clear the area of the agricultural activity, and particularly the pig farming that was going on. Clearly, it wasn't necessarily something that the community was happy about, but we did it in consultation and conversation with the surrounding community and with the Member of Parliament. But a wider plan was developed for the cave, on which the Chukka people have built. I want to take this opportunity, we don't often do it, we criticize civil servants, but there is an architect who is a civil servant whose name is Steve Devenish. The redevelopment of Harrison Cave as we know it, and the work liaising with Chukka, and a lot of what I'm going to speak about fell to this single individual who led a department without any fuss, without any flair, which took Barbados's principal natural asset, redeveloped it, and created a vision of what it could become regionally and globally. As part of that vision, we own the patent on the trams that are used in the cave. The patent for the technology, the patent for the engineering is owned by the people of Barbados through the government of Barbados. All of that was Steve's work. It was at that time that we had also intended, and I don't want to make a political comment, but part of the strength of government can be in policy continuity. So when you have all these plans, when you have a vision, when you've done all the work, and then the government changes, and people don't capture the vision, don't do the work, don't feel that they need to make an effort, everything that you've done, all the money that has been spent, which could have been recouped, which could have advanced the product, is really lost. And it is a tragedy that in 2008, when government changed, all of the work that was done was essentially squandered because the vision was not captured and continued. In addition to that, we had developed souvenirs for the cave. Now, my view at the time was that everybody has T-shirts, and you saw a lot of grass hats coming through the airport and going out on the part of the tourists and so, but that we actually needed replicas, whether there were coasters, whether there were bookends, whether there were other tangible reproductions or replicas of the cave, of stalactites, of stalagmites, and so on, to sell as part of the souvenir base, and to widen the souvenir base beyond the usual T-shirt, beyond the usual hat, and cap, and so on. And so there was a whole set of designs that were completed for specific, exclusive to the cave souvenirs that were then never produced. That too was lost. So I'm grateful to the government and to its partners, Chukka, for the work that is now going to be done and has been done to continue the vision that we had for the cave, and in fact, to expand and broaden and enhance and modernize that vision to make this product an excellent asset and representation of what Barbados has to offer. And it is important in the context of Barbados as a mature tourism destination, because if you have come to Barbados several times, or if you are coming for the first time, you want things to do beyond going to the Gap. There must be wholesome family-related activity. There must be natural attractions. There must be products that excite, that create variation, that create variety, that cause is money to be spent in Barbados, that stays in Barbados. That causes money to be spent with indigenous Barbadians who represent the majority of our population. And therefore, it is critical. The component that we heard about this morning, which includes the community, is so important to us, not creating the concept or perpetuating the concept that tourism is about us and them, that there is a divide between those who own and operate tourism facilities and generate revenues and profits from them, but that nationals must only have the filter down and the trickle down incomes from these tourism activities. Far too many of our products, and we are grateful for investment, but a lot of expenditure happens and investment happens, or monies are paid outside of Barbados. And therefore, it is critical as we create new tourism attractions and expand our tourism product that we create avenues for Barbadians to earn and earn well. Part of what we did at the time with Steve Devonish leading was to create something called In the Heart of Barbados, which was an activity, a festival based in St. Thomas, based in rural Barbados, using artisans, cooks, craftspersons, entertainers from the St. Thomas community surrounding the cave. And the idea always was that these persons who lived around the cave were not just to experience the cave as the community where people drove through to reach the cave, but they were to be able to earn revenues from it. And therefore, as part of allowing tourists to have a more authentic, more immersive, more indigenous, more real tourism experience, we created a situation where those coming into the cave were able to stop at the bars and cook shops and houses along the road into Allen View, by which the cave was accessed, so that Barbadians, ordinary Barbadians as we like to say, but everyday Barbadians living in those communities could earn an income from the tourists who came in and went into the cave. We also had a tiered entrance fee, which made it far more affordable for the average Barbadian to come to and enjoy the cave. Now, this brings me to yet another point, which is this. The model of development that is increasingly emerging is based on boots, build, own, operate, transfer. It is based on PPPs, public-private partnerships, and other joint venture initiatives, which uses private capital to help government conduct development projects and development activities which they cannot necessarily afford or which are not budgeted for, but which will inure to the benefit of the taxpayers and the people of Barbados and other countries where such mechanisms and investment vehicles are used. So that this modern use of the PPP and this partnership with Chaka enables a level of spending, of creativity, of innovation, of expansion that the government at this time on its own would not be able to afford. And in expanding the cave to create not only a single product, but an ecosystem of tourism products which create new interests, new revenues, new activities, really is important to the sense of the community and to the immediate community of Allen View, who will benefit from these activities, and to the wider community of Barbados and to our tourism product generally. And this brings me to the point that a lot of tourism investment in Barbados has come outside of the hotels. A lot of tourism investment outside of hotels and restaurants has come from government. But we have to find a way to get the public sector to make investments in tourism. We don't have things like, I beg your pardon, private sector to invest more heavily in tourism. We don't have bowling alleys in Barbados. Bowling alleys are very popular. Is one coming? Or we have one? We have one? Oh, well, that shows, sir, how much time I spend at home, or in other kinds of activities. Be careful. No, I'm not going to give chapter and verse because I don't want to titillate too much. But I do. No, but I won't get there. My apologies, sir. But the point that I'm making is, if you look at what Disney has done for Florida, that is a private sector investment. And what you need is a few people with vision, not just putting it into the retail sector and selling food and clothing, which is important, but you really need to see innovation and the building out of new tourism products with new kinds of investments, new kinds of products, new innovations, and new types of activities, not just for tourists, but first and foremost for Barbadians. Because there is no doubt now, when you go out at night, you see Barbadians from rum shops. I mean, I was making the point that people laughed a couple of weeks ago that you couldn't even get into muster when the days come. It was so full. And they have become very innovative. You can call ahead, and, or a nice young lady will run downstairs and serve you the food curbside, which is to be commended. But the point that I'm making is that really, we need to have the private sector fully engaged. And if government has to offer, because it is government's responsibility to stimulate, to regulate, and to incentivize. And if government has to offer now some kind of stimulus to the private sector in order to generate and encourage greater investment and diversification of the tourism product and the activities, that time has come. A young lady who has a store on Roebuck Street was speaking to me about the need to set up a huge child's park and play center with all kinds of equipment and so on. And people want places for their children to go. Young people want places to go. Older people as well, those of us who are not bowling, sir, want places to go. And therefore, it is critical that we start now in modern Barbados to have more activity, different kinds of activity, and that we create new tourism products. I was making the point that you couldn't even get into muster to say that Barbadians themselves, whether it is chefette, champers or musters, Barbadians are going out to eat in large numbers. They're going to various kinds of entertainments and activities. And wherever you go, places are full. Whether it is a rum shop in St. Lucie called Shiraz, or whether it's in Silver Sands, the places are crowded. Or Oystons, places are crowded. And therefore, it shows that, particularly coming out of COVID, that there is a hunger and demand for activity. It is no wonder I was reading, I'm not sure if it was in the newspaper or probably looking at a UN site, I think online a couple of days ago, that tourism bookings are now higher than pre-COVID. so that the demand for activity and for tourism-based activity on island for a new product is going to increase even further. Now, the tourism products that we are seeking to build out may be of various types. We have had attempts with the flower forest. We've had various types of luck with the Welch Mahal Gully, and I could mention other natural attractions, but it is significant. Yet another project which I had been working on, which was stopped in 2008, was the Botanical Garden, and now it is being widely used. People are there day and evenings too. You know, all kinds of activities taking place there, from recreation to the holding of reveal parties, gender reveal parties. Because sexuality reveal parties are also a thing, but gender reveal parties and so on. So wide range of activities going on at the garden, people exercising, people taking time out to spend time with family, good activities, and therefore it's an indication, a very clear indication that there is scope for all of these things to to create space for them in the marketplace, and that there is a demand for all these different types of activities, and the opportunity for the investors, therefore, to earn from them. Part of the Honourable Senator, in the course of her opening remarks, spoke to the issue of gullies. And I want to, again, go back historically to say that there had been actually a policy paper, a cabinet paper, and conversation in cabinet, in the Parliament. And I believe that it has, again, come into the new Labour Party manifesto, this whole notion of the use of our gullies, the productive use of our gullies, not to harm the ecosystems, not to adversely impact the flora or fauna in our ecosystems, but to ensure that the ecosystems are cared for and generate revenues for the communities surrounding them. And I'm glad to see that the gully around Allen View and around the Harrison Cave is going to then become the first. And I say the first because there is tremendous scope for these gullies to be used. I mean, there are trails and nature trails and tracks and caves which connect up Barbados, and people are looking for these kinds of green activities, for these kinds of, Barbadians too want to hike around. I mean, there are now large numbers of hiking groups and hiking associations going out on Saturdays and Sundays, morning and evening hikes, trying to see how the country off-road connects up. You have the people doing off-roaders, whether they're using those, we call them motorcycle type things. Yes, thank you. ATVs, which are absolute fun. I think they're great. But I tend to like speed, so I would. But the point is that off of the beaten track, there is another side of Barbados to be exploited, to be explored, and to be protected, because we have to put in place regimes that will allow for the care and protection of these ecosystems once we put them into wider use. But put them into wider use we must, because the island is a small one, and if we're going to continue as a tourism destination, and a mature one at that, we really have to find ways of continuing to create new interest, new activity, and more important for the average Barbadian, new opportunity to earn from these various activities. This then connects, Mr. President, to the issue of the development of a 52-week calendar of activities from which it is intended that Barbadians will be able to earn. We have developed, no doubt about it, skills, whether it comes from hair and nails, whether it has to do with baristas, whether it has to do with people who mix drinks, mixologists, all of the chefs on island, all of the artists, and we have to find a way to generate enough revenues and incomes for these individuals. It is going to become even more important when we move to this online tourism product, or this version of the online product that I have been advocating for 5 years. And now, since COVID, the scope of it, the potential for it, I think, is going to be better appreciated and better captured, because we are now using the technology and leveraging it for various kinds of recreation and in other ways. So the notion of community tourism villages, the notion of an online tourism Barbados, of an online tourism product, the notion of a 52-week calendar of activities, the notion of new investment and new tourism product and tourism-based activities is all very important as we create opportunities for Barbadians to own a larger stake in the economic space of Barbados, and to create opportunities for revenue generation and for profit for Barbadians who have to cater to the tourists. When tourists talk about how warm and friendly Barbadians are, those Barbadians, those are the ones who deserve to benefit from these new opportunities that are going to be created. So it is with a deep sense of pride that I witness this continuing development of the cave. I congratulate the minister and all who have been involved, to the long-suffering and long-enduring Steve Devonish, who has been really the pioneer and the person executing the work. Very often, we congratulate the ministers and we congratulate the leaders and the figureheads, but there is, whenever a project is successfully executed, in fact, whenever there's a project badly executed, there is somebody who has had responsibility for carrying the burden of it morning and night. And Steve really has been that individual, and I don't think that we have ever publicly lauded or recognized him. And I should like to take the opportunity to do so. I see by your acclamation that you have joined with me in so doing. I trust that he will continue to work in the protection and the redevelopment of what really is Barbados's premier natural attraction, and what is a globally and world-class asset of which we should be truly proud. And the work that has now been done in partnership with the private sector shows the kind of Caribbean innovation and creativity, because that is really what it is now. It now salutes and celebrates Caribbean creativity and innovation, which allows us to develop something that can stand the test of time, that can stand and be compared favorably with any other high-quality asset in the world, tourism asset or entertainment attraction and asset. And what we now equally need to do is to ensure that we continue the development in such a way that the wider Barbados benefits, and it isn't only those persons who are seen to be the developers at the top, but average Barbadians who must take the 1 million tourists a year who come or thereabout into their homes, onto their streets, who have to share our space as we welcome them, that we too must benefit and must be able to feel a sense of pride as we derive revenues from the various activities and the various products and projects. I close therefore on a note of congratulations and a reminder that it was also the intention that the cave should be used as a space to hold conferences, various kinds of recreational and social activities, weddings, birthday parties, night entertainment, and so on. I don't know if that is still the plan, but far too often we have assets, whether it is school plant, whether it is government facilities, used during the day and sitting empty at night when they can be fully utilized, or when, if it is a revenue generating space, that it can be used beyond the usual 8 to 4, 8 to 5 to generate further incomes or put into a different kind of usage other than the core purpose for which it was constructed or developed. I therefore am grateful. It is a humbling and also deeply gratifying experience, Mr. President, sir, and I know it is something that you also feel, and in time, others who come to government or who serve at the level of cabinet, and there are some in here now serving, others who will yet serve, I'm confident that in time you will get to see ideas that you have had become reality. You will encounter frustration as others don't capture the vision and let it fall. But somebody else may come along and carry it even further. And when that happens and the people of Barbados can benefit from it, then you truly feel that your service in public life has been worth it. And I am grateful that I have come to see the circle close and to see Harrison Cave now being redeveloped and utilized in the way that it was contemplated. I remember all of the cursing that I got on the call-in programs for the money that had been spent on the redevelopment, and in fact, for the vision that others could not capture. But my heart sings today, and I sing in praise of those who have done this work. And I sing in praise and in celebration of those who will benefit from it. Much obliged to you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Honorable Senator Thompson. Other speakers, Senator Mulroney.
Mr. President, as I rise to speak on this matter, I do want to begin by thanking Ambassador Thompson. You know, I find that oftentimes we do not necessarily value a deeper understanding of the historical context in which we make decisions and in which we work. Oftentimes we may be guilty of believing, whether as a government altogether or as a single individual, that the work or the thing that we are doing and putting forth is new. Yeah? That we have done it, that we have developed it. And it is a point of reflection, as Ambassador Thompson spoke, for us to remember that we are always building on what has gone before. And I therefore thank Ambassador Thompson for taking us through that history. And I heard the tears that you would have had and the struggles. And that also as well allows us to reflect on the fact that developing policy takes time, and that it can also be very painful, but also as well very rewarding. I also as well feel that I also want to congratulate the Minister of Tourism and all of her colleagues as well. Again, I think that we don't often, Mr. President, take time to recognize the very hard work that it is being done, and particularly in this context of the COVID pandemic, so that we have a Minister of Tourism and her entire team that is seeking to rebuild and reposition Barbados in the context of an environment that is even more competitive in the context of the COVID-19. And that is significant. And we hear the work in terms of the attempts to make sure that we continue to have airlift. And even in the context of this discussion, to be able to diversify the tourism product. And that is tremendous work, again, because we have to make sure that we are careful to remember, and again, Mr. President, I'm being reflective here, of the very fundamental contribution of tourism to us nationally. There's oftentimes a debate and discussion about tourism that can sometimes be a little bit negative. Why are we spending money there? It's only about the sun, sea, and sand, and we got all of these tourists that coming down, and you know, sometimes you hear certain sentiments that often undervalue the fundamental contribution that tourism makes to all of us, and not just to the hotel sector, but in a real way to Barbadians. I have friends whose entire family work in the tourism sector. I'm speaking about the women who have built houses and sent to school their children by setting up a van outside of a hotel to feed hotel workers. That is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about entrepreneurs who have built out their entire livelihoods around catering to the tourism sector. This is the average Barbadian. And that we have to be truthful when we speak about tourism and its value. Least we get caught up in the suggestion that this, again, as was indicated before, is for others and not for us. Least we forget that as Barbadians here, and this country entirely benefits from the tourism product. Mr. President, but as we talk about that tourism product, we also have to be mindful of the fact, as I said before, that we are in a competitive environment. We do not exist by ourselves offering our sun, sea, and sand. If it was only us, that would be all right. And while like most Barbadians, I think our sun, sea, and sand is the best thing that's a sliced bread and they got nobody else like ours. The truth is that we do not exist by ourselves. Others are innovating. Others are ensuring that they themselves have pride of place in the tourism market. And therefore, the diversification and expansion of our tourism product then has to be foremost as we go forward. Because we are not building a tourism product for today and for us today, but we are building for generations. We talk about a sustainable tourism product. And what that means is investment that is long-term. And this is why, certainly, I am extremely excited about the build-out and expansion of Harrison Cave, because I want to admit here today, Mr. President, I want to admit, and I hope I can be forgiven, that while I have commended others to go to Harrison Cave, I, like most Barbadians, have been guilty of, saying, but Tarragon 2012, I see that already. I really haven't been for quite a couple of years. I don't want to say how long. So I'm guilty, Mr. President, of perhaps not necessarily valuing it as much as a Barbadian as I should have. But what this expansion does for me is to create a level of excitement, because now I'm a tourist. Now I intend to be a tourist. And oftentimes as Barbadians, we do not see ourselves as tourists. We talk about others coming here to enjoy what Barbados has. But this expansion offers an opportunity for all of us now to become tourists. I'm not necessarily, the most daredevilish, but I will try those zip lines. I will try those zip lines. And since I go to the gym, I will be like you, Mr. President, and perhaps try the harder obstacle course as well. We'll go together, Mr. President. But what I'm excited about is that this offers for the entire family to participate, for the entire family to be able to go and experience what is a national treasure. I do not believe that we understand fundamentally what we have in Harrison Cave. I do not believe, Mr. President, that we fully appreciate this, what is called almost the seventh wonder that we have in Barbados, and the importance of it to us as a people. And I speak that fundamentally and passionately, because even as Minister with responsibility for culture, one of the fundamental things that I think that we have to be aware of is the importance of our heritage. And even as we diversify our tourism product, one of the fastest growing markets in tourism is heritage tourism, Mr. President. It is heritage tourism. And again, it allows us to ensure that the tourists who comes here for the sun, sea, and sand initially leaves the beach, takes their head out from looking only at the sun, and spends some money in the local economy with Barbadians. Heritage tourism is about ensuring that we can allow visitors to also experience what we have in our history, and for them, like us, to be able to value it, see it, and experience it, Mr. President. And it was, for me, Mr. President, a delight that just last night I was able to preside over the launch of Heritage Month, which is a calendar for a month of activities under the Division of Culture and the World Heritage Committee that will see conversations and events intended to bring attention again to our cultural heritage and the link between heritage and tourism. Mr. President, that ceremony was held at the Jewish Synagogue, and I feel like I having to be able to admit several things and hold my head down in shame in this particular session a lot, but as I got brought back, so I can go there. Because I have to admit, Mr. President, I had never visited the Jewish Synagogue. I passed and traversed Bridgetown a million times and have never went in. Right here in Barbados. And it was extremely poignant to be there at the opening of Heritage Month and to have Dr. Carl Watson take us through the Jewish synagogue, which is not just about going, and many of us, when the Jewish synagogue, we think, we're just going into a church and we're going to sit down, but it's an experience within itself. It's an entire museum of history. And I was also excited to learn, Mr. President, that Jewish synagogue is one of the oldest in the Western Hemisphere, right here in Barbados. We have it. Mr. President, I was also as well excited to learn, and again, I hope that's not the only body, that we have walking tours of Bridgetown now that are being offered as well, that take visitors right through historic Bridgetown. And not only that, Mr. President, we have cannons, hidden cannons right in Swan Street. Right in Swan Street, we have hidden cannons right about this historic Bridgetown. And what I'm emphasizing to you, Mr. President, is that in the context of diversifying our tourism product, that we have to make sure that we are valuing what it is that Barbados has to offer, and that in the diversification of that tourism product, that we also as well understand the heritage aspect of it, such that we have to be able to ensure that there is linkages between tourism and culture in order to ensure that we maximize the diversification of our heritage. I want to indicate that in that context, the Minister of Tourism, myself as Minister with responsibility of culture, have taken several steps to make sure that we work together. And actually, and I hope that I'm not preempting her, the Minister will soon be moving to ensure that jointly we sign an MOU for cultural cooperation with Ghana. Because again, we understand fundamentally the linkage between tourism and culture, and again, that market that is there for heritage tourism, and how we build that out within the diaspora, and as well to ensure that we can bring attention to what we have here. A lot of that work, Mr. President, has also started. The reimagination, I'm going to call it that, of Golden Square is part of that diversification and building out of the cultural tourism product. Not only for locals, and I'm hoping that Barbadians, all Barbadians, will make it a point to go down to Golden Square and to see what we have there. But we have visitors who are coming to Barbados to make their way down to Golden Square to look at the linkages that they have and the names on the wall to see where they can trace their family history, Mr. President. I draw attention to what we are doing under the Division of Culture at Rock Hall Freedom Park. That is there. So that the diversification of the tourism product, Mr. President, is something that this government understands fundamentally that we have to be able to pay attention to. But I want to reiterate, and I am not going to be afraid, Mr. President, of sounding like a stuck record, because there's an important point to make, that we are moving away from a model of tourism in which the benefits of that are given to others, that is extrapolated and it's taken out of this country, to a model in which Barbadian citizens and communities benefit. And that is fundamental, extremely fundamental, if again, and I use the word, we're going to have a sustainable tourism product for this country. Mr. President, as I close, I also want to focus as well on the fact that we have to be sure, when we talk about sustainability, that we tell this story to our young people, yeah? Because I fear, again, that very often we have a way of, kind of putting a fence around our development and talking about it as a particular moment in time. But I believe fundamentally that as we talk about sustainable tourism product, as we talk about how we diversify, we also must ensure that we engage our young people so that they can contribute to the innovativeness that needs to go into expanding our tourism product for years to come. That they understand that as we build out this tourism product, the space that is made, and it can be seen as well. I heard Senator Cummings in her remarks indicate the need or the reflection that, oh boy, we didn't think of this. Oh boy, why didn't I think of this? And it is the innovation that we are seeing now from Chickasaw, Barbados, that is allowing for the expansion of Harrison Cave, and that can happen in other areas. But we need to be able to bring along generations with us so that they can see themselves as invested in this tourism product, so that it remains indelibly Barbadian. So that it remains indelibly Barbadian. Mr. President, I thank you, and I'm obliged for having the opportunity to speak to this, and I commend and I again want to invite all Barbadians to take hold of the assets that we have here, to value them, to see ourselves as not only takers in the context of the tourism market. I am reminded that We have a mantra which says that the first tourist has to be a Barbadian, and that therefore we are intrinsically part of the tourism product that we are developing, not for others, but for us as well. I'm obliged, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Dr. Monroe Knight. Senator Dr. Bruffett.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to lend my voice of support to this initiative, which I see as an important element of the diversification of our tourism product. I believe, and I think you'll agree with me, that there are those who come to our shores who come not only for the sea and the sand, but to see what our country is all about. They want to hear about our history. They want to hear about our heritage. They want to experience our culture. And in my view, Mr. President, this is an example of the diversification that is necessary in order to give our tourism product sustainability. I hope, Mr. President, that this investment that has been made in the redevelopment of Harrison Cave is just the beginning of a new era of public sector, private sector relations and initiatives that will redound to the diversification of our tourism offerings to a more diversified community of tourists who visit our shores. In lending my support to this initiative, therefore, Mr. President, I'm conscious of the fact that when I was in China, representing my country, I met many persons who showed an interest in heritage tourism, in culture, and in community tourism, and not just in the sun and the sea. And I assure you that based on my own information and analysis, as we seek to diversify our tourism into newer markets, that a substantial number of those who will come because of the uniqueness of our development, our history, and our culture. It is true that there are many places in the world today with sand and sea. And therefore, we must go a little further and offer unique experiences, because that is what the tourists of today is seeking. An experience that they can relate to their children, to their friends. They went to Barbados and they saw something unique. I believe, therefore, that this initiative in the redevelopment of Harrison Cave is an important initiative for us. It helps with the sustainability of our tourism product and has the potential to attract a wider audience and a wider clientele to our country. I therefore would like to congratulate those who have been involved in this particular initiative. I say without any reservation that I believe that this is going to redound an increased visitor turnout to our country as the news gets around of the beauty, the magic, the uniqueness of Harrison Cave. As I've traveled around the world, I have seen places that are less endowed, less exotic, that people have done great things in promoting them. We have a jewel, and I'm glad that we are polishing that jewel to make it available to the world. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Dr. Bradford. Senator Nichols.
Mr. President, I'm happy to support the amendment to the bill before the Senate today. Largely, we understand that it is really for more administrative efficiency in terms of the ministerial allocation of responsibility. I want to thank the leader of the Senate for a very concise report to the country on the work that the government has done to put the natural heritage asset we call Harrison's Cave on a much more sounder commercial footing. The government has indeed, under Ambassador Thompson when she was minister, borrowed monies to redevelop Harrison's Cave, a loan that is still being repaid by taxpayers of Barbados to this day. In that period leading up to a Cricket World Cup in 2007. And the splendor and majesty of that natural heritage asset has been expanded to the view of many people around the world, and certainly as a resident of the community in St. Thomas, we were very happy with those developments. The truth is that the government will never have enough resources to be able to capitalize natural attractions such as Harrison's Cave. And one of the good things about the commercial venture with Chukka is that all of the plans for the development of Harrison's Cave over the years have been stalled when there have been a change of government. This commercial relationship puts the business venture at Harrison's Cave on a sure footing so that the residents who have to live in the community are certain about their relationship with this attraction and people coming into the community. And one of the things that was stalled was the development of the Harrison's Cave zone of environmental protection, and delineating what that zone is, and therefore creating certain obligations and rights within the community, particularly those in the Island View community. And there has been a lot of uncertainty over the years as we hear about the developments going on in the cave. People start to wonder, Mr. President, what about the promises previous administrations have made in respect to some of the outstanding issues between the government and the people in the Island View community? And I want to compliment the leader, and I know she does not blow her own trumpet, but I have sat in meetings that she has co-chaired or chaired in which many facets of government have come together to deal with the issues surrounding Harrison's Cave in a much more comprehensive way than she has herself demonstrated today. And a lot of the developments that are to come are part and parcel of her own leadership. And I speak specifically, Mr. President, of the issue of compensation for landowners within the Island View community. This cave was developed opened up as an attraction in 1981. And for many, many years, the company called Caves of Barbados and its successors through the National Conservation Commission and the now extinct Caves Authority Board have utilized the subsurface areas of land. Some of the land is privately owned and some of the land is owned by the state. And there are even parcels under the operation of the Harrison Cave facility where there is no known ownership of these lands. And for many years, the issue of compensation for the use of subsurface areas of lands has bedeviled many an administrator, and certainly the people in the Island View community and the wider Richmond Hall area have consistently raised this as an issue, not to the extent that it has ever reached to the stage of litigation, but I do believe that there has been a conscious and deliberate acceptance of that claim by the part of the Barbados Labour Party governments. But when we lost office in 2008, a lot of work that was done in the lead up to that initial development that I spoke of, led by Ambassador Thompson, a lot of that work has fallen flat. And I want to publicly say on the record our appreciation for the leadership shown by Minister Cummings and our Member of Parliament in keeping this issue on the front burner. I will confess that I have made some small contribution to the whole issue of how government should treat to that concept of compensation for landowners of subsurface areas of land. It is not a concept that is perhaps well articulated within the concept of the English common law, because we know from a legal perspective that the owner of land owns everything from the surface of the land to the heavens and everything to the center of the earth. But what does that really mean? And I say that against the backdrop that people in the Island View community who have lived through the development of several phases of the cave have accepted that in this treasure being unfolded to the world, while they may have a legitimate claim to some form of compensation for the use of the very many tunnels that go for very, very long distances away from the center of the attraction, this attraction is also very important in terms of what we are doing in Barbados as part of the tourism development on the inland side. So that the time has come for this matter to be resolved, and I know Senator Cummings is very fervent in her resolve to ensure that when the next phase of amendments to the legislation come before Parliament, that the issue of compensation is one that can be settled once and for all, and that there is a framework not only for Harrison Cave to be dealt with, but all caves in Barbados. And it is very interesting to note that Harrison Cave is not the only major cave in Barbados. Many members of the public go to Coles Cave, which is just down the road. And you will recall, or may recall, Mr. President, quite recently, a young man had to be rescued by the emergency personnel from Coles Cave. And I happened to do some research on Coles Cave, and I was directed to former Senator Professor Fraser, his book. And he mentions Coles Cave as being recorded alongside mention of Harrison's Cave from the early histories of Barbados, from the time of Poyer. And he criticizes or suggests that Poyer's representation of the splendor and beauty of Harrison's Cave was second to Coles Cave. Coles Cave, I am not sure in terms of the ownership of it, but I know that it is a place where the public have gone for generations and have explored the cave. Being from St. Thomas and cannot swim, I have never ventured into the water because I understand there's a chamber that you can stand and you go into the water and come out on the other side. And that is where the beauty of Coles Cave lies. But if you are not adventurous to swim under that channel of water, you will never be able to see the splendor and beauty of Coles Cave. But young people go and explorers and adventurous people go there. And I understand that if you go, there's an exit close to the Holy Innocents Church that you can exit. But when there is a lot of rainfall and the lakes tend to fill up very quickly, it can become a very daunting experience for those persons who go into the cave. And I'm happy to learn that the young man was rescued and that there was no loss of life. But, Mr. President, that brings me to the point that we need to do more in relation to the regulation of activities in caves, whether that is to promote educational pursuits, whether it's for scientific research, for recreation. There are a lot of caves in Barbados. And the Caves Act, as it presently exists, has what I consider to be a limited definition of a cave. And I have suggested to Senator Cummings, as minister leading this entire process, that we need to broaden the definition of caves in Barbados, not only to be able to regulate the activities with them, but we also need to be able to monitor the geological movements and activities, that seismic activity and what's not, so that these caves, wherever they exist, do not create dangers to people who might venture in them or live or operate near them as well. I also believe, Mr. President, that in some other places in the world and countries in the world, caves are also defined in law as man-made caves. We have an extensive network of tunnels in Barbados, particularly in the Garrison community. And we can also speculate as to the reason why these tunnels were erected many, many years ago, obviously for military and security purposes. But these tunnels are now being explored to a limited extent. And I don't believe that there is a proper regulatory or legal framework governing how these tunnels are utilized by the public, which government department is in charge of them. Are they still part of the security apparatus of Barbados? These things need to be clarified, because I do believe that the very rich network of tunnels in Barbados can add to the very splendor of what the historic Garrison community, which is a UNESCO heritage site, can offer to the world. But before we do that, I believe that we need to look at how the legislation we have on board is currently set in place to create a framework where we know that if we are allowing people to go into man-made caves and natural caves and so forth. There's also caves that people will tell you in St. Philip and in St. Lucie and on the eastern side of St. Peter in Barbados, that people who go onto the coast can tell you that the waves create blowholes, as we learn in geography. And people go deep into these blowholes, can come out at the top and so forth, and explore these things. So therefore, we need to do a lot more work in ascertaining the cave network in Barbados, both the caves that are inland and those on the coast, and those man-made tunnels that have been with us for quite some time, to see what educational, commercial, recreational, and scientific benefits can be derived from this. And therefore, we need to expand the definition of caves and caves of interest. We need to put a strong regulatory framework in place to ensure that in the exploration of these caves, that we have a good understanding of what should obtain when people go into these caves. I want to also commend the government for incorporating the community within the wider Wetchmore Hall area, and particularly the work that is being done with the Holy Innocents Primary School, because many times we allow development to occur and encourage investors to come in, but there is no connection to the community. And there are no planning obligations or development obligations that come with the permissions that we give or with the commercial concessions that are created to allow for these attractions to emerge. And therefore, this is a very important aspect of this commercial arrangement with Chaka. And therefore, as the minister has indicated, we hope that it will continue. There are significant plans to integrate the community within the experience of coming into Harrison's Cave. And therefore, we will not see a lopsided development where people are driving through in large tour buses and seeing squalor next to them, or a community that is not earning an income or participating in the activity that is being generated by Chaka. And I think that the government has to be congratulated for that. And I'm certain that the Member of Parliament has long been a strident caller for this kind of activity to occur, to spur development within the community. And I know that with the leader of government business in the Senate has heard these things, and I've seen her work in action. With those few words, Mr. President, I'm obliged to you.
Thank you very much, Senator Nichols. Senator Mr. Nenard.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I listened to Senator Nichols, and I'm very pleased that a lawyer of his caliber would stand to speak on the need to expand the definition of a cave. I'm very pleased that he's done it, and people will listen, because he's a lawyer of quality. But Mr. President, as a child, I have always thought of caves as being associated with water. And I grew up in an area in Christchurch, which you represented at some point in time, that has many caves, and none of them are underground. And the Caves Act speaks to caves as being below the surface. As a child, I've always thought of caves as being related to water and the Arawaks, or the Kalinago. And Mr. President, one of the things that we must not do in this country is to allow the important cultural heritage of those who have been here before to be destroyed in the development. And we see it, Mr. President, sometimes when roads are being cut and a cave is encountered and is filled in, and no one says anything. But this act protects even the stalactites and stalagmites which one might find in the cave. It says you cannot remove them. In Chancery Lane, near where I grew up, there are caves that often had bones in them and various artifacts, but they seem to be forgotten, and they're there in large numbers. Mr. President, I have often thought of Harrison's Cave in terms of water, and the first time I visited the cave, I realized that this significant volume of water that flowed through this cave had to be going somewhere and was probably being used to meet our needs. And what this amendment and this refocus on Harrison Cave hopefully will do, it will remind us that when the boundaries were adjusted and that perimeter was set up, it was set up to protect the cave, but the cave is a direct result of the activity of water. And what was happening indirectly was that the government was protecting part of the water supply. I'm told, Mr. President, by third hand, that a senior water expert has admitted that the water which flows through Harrison's Cave, some ends up in the Bell catchment. Some goes to Appalates, where we pump it. And some is being used by the company Ionics for desalination. And it tells us how important it is to protect what flows underground. Now, there's been, over the weekend, Mr. President, I want to congratulate the government on this, and I beg for your indulgence here, Mr. President. The Prime Minister opened the first phase of the redevelopment of the river plantation and reopen Browns Pond. And I wish to stand here and congratulate the government on this marvelous achievement. It has been long overdue, Mr. President. For many, many, many years, people have complained about water rights, which were being abused, and this government has taken the opportunity to fix it. And I want to say, promise made, promise kept. But Mr. President, that is not the only one to fix. We need to fix them all. And while this debate is about caves and caves, the caves in this particular matter are all related to water. We have to deal with the issue of water, because our island is largely porous, and most of the water we extract comes from underground. There's hardly much surface water. And when we develop the tourism aspect of caves, and we look at development in the surrounding communities, we must be mindful that we have to think ahead, not just for 5 years or 10 years, but probably centuries, because the problems of water will not go away. If what I'm told about Harrison's Cave is true, and we have equipment in Harrison's Cave and people in Harrison's Cave, it is vital that there be regulations in place that we do not contaminate it. And I'm not speaking of contamination from a big pen, Mr. President. There are things far worse than effluent from a big pen that can contaminate the water supply. And it's important, Mr. President, that there should be regulations to protect it, because people now have access to direct access on a daily basis to a source of underground drinking water. Mr. President, I'm obliged to you.
Thank you very much, Senator Mr. Miller. Any other speakers? Senator Hewitt.
Mr. President, thank you. I'm really moved by the presentations of all members of the House today. I really did not intend to speak today, but I think it would probably be unkind of me not to make a contribution on this particular bill that I support on behalf of the government, because I have a vested interest when it comes to that particular development in Island View. Mr. President, I want to commend the Deputy President, Senator Thompson, for the reflection. Sometimes we tend to forget the trajectory on which certain developments in government have traveled. I want to commend the Minister of Tourism for her contribution as well in terms of developing that particular space. I want to commend Senator Monroe Knight for giving us a vision as to where the cave is today, but what it also could be decades from now. And in terms of the regulatory framework, I want to commend Senator Nichols for giving us that overview, not only of Harrison's Cave, but also of the other cave systems in the country. Two more commendations, of course. Senator Brathwaite spoke at length with regards to his experience internationally in comparison to what is there at the Harrison's Cave location. And also we heard from Maynard mentioning his boyhood trips to the caves in Chancery Lane to do what young boys do. And there's also one in Gibbons as well, a very lengthy one across the Gibbons Bogs area. And I want to commend him for placing emphasis on the protection of the quality of water at the Harrison's Cave. Mr. President, it is quite interesting that a couple of the senators, a few of the senators, made mention to the unfortunate circumstance that occurs when governments transition. Mr. President, when you were in a different place, there was also development at Allen View under the then Housing and Neighborhood Upgrading Project. And this is a very unfortunate development. And while I do not intend to lay any political blows to anything, I think that it is squarely aligned to everything that has been mentioned here in terms of the lack of continuity and sustainability when government changes as well. I remember as a research officer very much on the project that focused on neighborhood upgrading, where the then minister in 2010 would have outlined to the residents of Allen View and the member of parliament that was present the plans to upgrade the Allen View community. They were speaking about bringing in sewer systems, connecting sewer systems. They're speaking about even putting in putting in pit latrines and different things that would protect the groundwater from that infiltrated and got into the cave system. And that was a promise made and a promise not kept. Because to the extent of that project, and it was very extensive, we, the government of Barbados, engaged with the Inter-American Development Bank to the tune of $45 million US, 30 million from the bank and 15 million coming from the government of Barbados to ensure that we could upgrade Allen View so as to, one, protect the environmental sustainability and infrastructure of the cave, because as many senators mentioned, there is some serious farming going on down in there as well, particularly pig farming. And also, the second thing was to ensure that we had some level of continuity of economic activity for the residents that lived around the cave as well. One in particular, remember Simonetta. Simonetta is the lady who owns the shop on the entrance of the cave on the left-hand side. She told me the very first time we went there, she built her entire house and her daughter's house out of that particular establishment. When persons would come on tours, the buses would sometimes reverse into her establishment before making trek further down to the cave. And she was very proud of everything that was on offer. And this is where I want to also commend the Minister of Tourism for recognizing the need to have that level of input and buy-in from the residents of the community as well. But I say all that to say, Mr. President, that what is on offer here is not just an establishment being managed by Chukka, but a framework of sustainability from this government, and I suspect based on what is being done, it is going to continue to other governments as well. And that is sustainability, Mr. President, and for that I want to commend the Minister of Tourism for her inputs and the work of the workers in the ministry as well. Mr. President, I also want to speak to the issue of water quality, and in a different place, the debate, a much larger debate may come in terms of water quality, but the revelations from Senator Minard are some very serious revelations. And water quality is something in Barbados that we take for granted. We generally, the public, take for granted. And when something does not necessarily hit us as a scarcity, some of us, because for some it is a reality in terms of scarcity, we take it for granted. Now, the water at the caves of Barbados, had we been given the opportunity to maximize on the estimated $5 million US allocated for Allen View to upgrade many of the facilities and connect it to a sewage, would not be as serious an issue today as it really is. We would have had a number of persons, I think, Mr. President, if you allow me, we would have had probably 63 households connected to that system. Apologies. And a number of other things would have happened there as well. There were issues with regards to also water tanks. I'm just going to list them, Mr. President, because this project promised the construction, as I said, of a sewer system, the trenching and pipe work to be done as well, the creation of 32 manholes, 61 household connections to the system, 4 septic tanks and filter beds, utility associated to other remedial work, and 12 household toilet add-ons to be done. And also the construction of a 540 square meters of new road to be provided and provide a secondary access within the community of Allen View, because that was a huge issue down there as well, when there was only one road in and one road out. I believe it may still be the same circumstance where there's one road in and one road out in Allen View. So, Mr. President, I want to say that the presentation that I took from the Minister of Tourism is not one solely about Chukka, and it's not one solely about the wonderful activities that would take place both inside and outside of the cave itself, but it's really one about sustainability. It's one where she basically called to the Barbadians just now to submit your ideas in terms of how you can take it to the next level. And with those few words, Mr. President, I want to support the bill and I want to support the government as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Harewood. Senator Cummings.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I want to, first of all, thank every senator that spoke. There is always a wealth of knowledge that resides in this chamber, and the collection of the representatives here really speak to the richness of our collective wisdom, starting first of all with our former Minister of Environment, former Cabinet Minister, who would have been in a different incarnation, treating to the last set of developments from the Harson's Cave project, and then having to witness them go into abeyance for an extended period of time. And I now have the absolute privilege of being able to preside over the resuscitation of new work and also new partners who come with new ideas. And it goes really into what I was speaking about earlier about twinning that which is old with that which is new, that which is historical with that which is contemporary, and being able to bring that collective input into where we need to go as a nation, and specifically on the question of the caves of Barbados. In this instance, the anchor cave that we're treating to is Harson's Cave. For the broader discussion, Mr. President, I want to raise a couple of things that were spoken about by various members who spoke. And the Deputy President of the Senate spoke about a number of persons, in particular Steve Devenish. Steve remains a member of the board that we currently still have at Harson's Cave. I did reappoint him to the board, including people like Dr. Donnelly Carrington, who's also from the community, who has spent years building up programs and projects in that community. I'm also pleased to share that the instruction has been given in one of those meetings that Senator Nichols spoke about by me, that in the heart of Barbados project, where Steve Devenish and the communities would have built out all of those projects in the tunnels and the caves around Barbados, and then they fell into abeyance, that those things are to be reintroduced now as part of the new mandate for the Caves of Barbados Limited, as I said earlier, which no longer has responsibility for managing Harson's Cave, but is managing the relationship with Chukka, which is managing Harson's Cave. And so we're happy about that. One of the things that I'm also very proud of, when I talk about $10 million in investment, colleagues, I'm not talking only about $10 million in investment in length of time. I'm talking about local architect Vicky Telford, who is doing the design, for example, who's now designing the pool that I described, which is going to fit into a gully architecture as opposed to a hotel space architecture. We're talking about local engineers who are now trying to figure out how to erect the suspension bridge in coral stone walls, and therefore how deep we're going to be able to go. We're talking about the local builders who have constructed the zip lines, the local artisans who have been able to do the designs for the local cabanas, the local persons who have taken Mount Gay rum barrels and converted them into furniture for the rum bar, for people can sit on the stools. This is what tourism development is all about. This is what the trickle-down effect is all about. It is not just the edifice or the infrastructure that we see, but it is all of the things that we don't see, and all of the people we don't see who benefit and are able to earn a livelihood because these things exist. And so I agree absolutely with the contribution being made, that was made earlier by Senator Monroe Knight. The notion that tourism is at odds or in competition with any other sector is as much a misnomer as anything else. Tourism is, if anything, a driver of economic activity that benefits every other productive sector. And in due course, you will hear about at least one of our signature initiatives once we have finalized it, which will then anchor what those linkages look like to all of our productive sectors, including agriculture, including manufacturing, including culture and creative industries, and of course, including all of the other related sectors that are dependent on buying in services and goods into the largest driver of economic activity, save from capital works projects. Now, it's funny to hear Mark, who is the principal of the CEO of Chukka Caribbean, who was here recently, and he said to me the other day, he said, well, you know, Lisa, the cave, whether it's daytime or nighttime, the lights have to be on. We have to run every tour through the cave with lights on. So they're also going to be beginning, Senator Thompson, nighttime tours in the Harson's Cave because they're using the energy anyway, even during the daytime. So you will have a daytime experience and a nighttime experience, and they will have extended opening hours that will allow for them to be able to maximize the return on investment to Chukka. But then if Chukka benefits based on the management agreement, the government of Barbados benefits based on the management payments that come into the government. Now, I want to make reference to the broader discussion on caves, to which we spoke above ground. I love the idea raised by Senator Nichols, and he knows of what he speaks, and he has been an active and a critical part of the conversation. For example, when he talks about the issue of compensation to the persons who live at the top of the crown of the cave. Initially, the model that was being explored, and Senator Nichols has been extraordinary in documenting what this looks like, was the model used for extraction of oil from underground. That doesn't work in this incarnation. And so from a legal perspective, we've had to look at other models. And so it is on that basis that the committees that manage how we treat to the cave and the regulatory frameworks that manage, that oversee the cave include, as I mentioned earlier, the Ministry with responsibility for energy, National Town and Country Planning Department, the Planning Division overall, the Ministry of Environment, including board members, sitting board members who are actively involved on the board every single day, like Steve Devenish, people from in the community, like Dr. Donnelly Carrington, who have extensive technical expertise, but also understand the nuances of the community and are able to anchor that. And I want to take a minute in closing, Mr. President, also to recognize the extraordinary leadership of the Member of Parliament for the area, the Honorable Cynthia Ford. Cynthia Ford, I was cleaning my car on Sunday, and I have a file in my car that when I became minister, she gave to me on Harson's Cave. She has accumulated from the time she became an MP until now, every piece of documentation involving Harson's Cave. And she did not keep it to herself. She gave it to me, and she made sure that I had the benefit of not just the technical inputs from the professionals, that I also had the technical inputs from those people who live in the community and sometimes know even more about their own community than those that we hire in to provide technical advice and guidance. And so she has always remained immersed. In the heart of COVID, when people didn't want to be outside, and there were those that were arguing that they should not be outside, she came on the ground with us in a house-to-house exercise when we were preparing to do the work. She and her teams, she was a minister at the time, and she took the time to make sure that the people in the community understood what was being proposed and that she was able to talk them through what those issues were. Those people who she didn't talk to in person, she spoke with through her office on the telephone. And we really appreciated her going before us and working with the community to make sure that they did not see random folks coming in with equipment and dressed in professional gear to undertake work, and they did not know what was happening in their own community. She made sure that she worked very closely with us, and I want to recognize her for that. I also appreciate the recommendation on the expansion of the definition of caves. It is quite possible that under the consultancy that we are undertaking now with the CBL board, that may be one of the recommendations that we could elaborate on. And then when we have a further amendment of the legislation, we should be in a position to be able to treat to that and the other issues which were raised also by Senator Maynard in terms of regulatory matters, impact on water supply, and whether or not we were treating to different definitions of caves and tunnels above ground, below ground, whether they had water flowing through, and so on. So these are some of the things that the cave is treating to now. And finally, I'm happy to share that we did create a steering committee to guide the work of the consultancy, and that steering committee will be comprised of the Caves of Barbados Limited, Steve Devonish in particular, and as one of the representatives on that, the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc., that obviously has a responsibility for marketing, Barbados Tourism Investment Inc., and Barbados Invest Barbados, because obviously we are speaking about the possibility of treating to it as a new investment opportunity and then anchoring that in the community. And so in a few months, we should be in a position to say what the forward movement is going to be on this new initiative. And so, Mr. President, with these few words, I wish to commend this bill to the Honorable the Senate, and I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Thank you very much, Senator Cummings. The question is that this bill be read a second time. Honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. The ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be read, that this House now dissolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that this Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. Honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. The ayes have it.
Where's the language?
Clause 1.
Question is that clause 1 do now stand for?
No.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that clause 1 stand part.
The question is that clause 1 do now stand for? All members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no.
Clause 2.
Methinks the ayes have it.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that clause 2 stand part.
Question is that clause 2 now stand part. All honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that using our report says honour the chair the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honour the President the passing of one bill in committee. All honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The President has reported to me the passing of one bill in committee. Senator Cummins.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill now be read a third time.
The question is that this bill be read a third time. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Caves Amendment Act 2022.
The question is that this bill be now passed and so cited. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This bill is now so passed and so cited.
Mr. President, I beg to move the suspension of this sitting of the Senate for 1 hour to reconvene at 2:35 p.m. to continue government's business.
The question is that this sitting be suspended until 2:35 p.m. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This sitting is suspended until 2:35 p.m.